Nasir, and I look after marketing at IP Fabric. Welcome to a special podcast called The Humans in the Network, where we've chosen to go in a slightly different direction today and focus on people in the networking industry, or in this case, two specific people. I'm joined today by Steve Price, IP Fabric's Growth Enablement Director, and Kevin Jameson, IP Fabric's Global BDR Director, both of whom joined IP Fabric on the same day a while back, several months back. And we'll be talking about their first impressions and experience of what it's like working in the pioneering network assurance space. Steve, Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jake.
I'll kick off with kind of an opening question. And I was wondering, could you tell me a little bit about your background and how you found adapting to this industry, to the network assurance space, and how it potentially compares with other industries that you've worked in before? Kevin, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, please.
Yeah, sure, Jake. Thank you. My first thought when I came across IP Fabric was, wow, this doesn't already exist. Coming from a security and data background, both of these verticals have fully automated end-to-end platforms that allow for visibility and access. And why would you not have the same for network management? The fact that everything you can traditionally access from the command line is already present in the IP Fabric dashboard is definitely a game changer. And as for adapting, I've been a part of several SaaS startups and scale-ups. And look, we constantly hear that many people say SaaS platforms are a nice-to-have option, but we already have processes in place to handle these tasks. IP Fabric, once you take a look at it, I can't imagine anybody saying anything that other than this is a must-have. And I can't imagine there's a network leader out there who still wants to manually manage their network.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we heard, we've heard similar things before, from people saying, how come this didn't exist before, or how come we're still doing this manually? So it's interesting to hear that from your side too. Steve, what's your take?
So, having worked in the tech space for a number of years, including telecoms, cloud compute, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, I found the conceptual side of networking fairly straightforward to grasp. Like it was all right. I got there, but what presented a new challenge for me, and still I would say part of my current learning curve. So we've only been here. It's 4 months ago that Kevin and I joined. I still would consider it a learning curve. Is the cultural side of networking, like the atmospherically what it's like working in that industry for those people. So understanding pain points, real life frustrations, goals, and success targets for people that work in networks has been something that is eye-opening and something that I'm still learning about. I still feel like I'm adapting as well, even though, like I say, it's a logical thing. I think it's the logical thing that makes it easier to understand. Like it's a case of science over art, which is nice. It's not like we're having to spin yarn and come up with creative phrases and stuff. It's like this is what it is. This is what it does. But also that's perhaps down to the fantastic brains, the people that we've got internally at IP Fabric, and that people's ability internally to be able to articulate what it is. Like people that work in our SE department, for example, all of them to a man have worked as network engineers before, right? It's the first time I've had that in any company that has had solutions architects or SEs, right? Like they've actually done the job. So so I find that I've got great resource, but also that I've got a very steep learning curve.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it there. It's kind of almost the team that makes a company, right? It's the people within it that kind of deliver the culture and everything else there. So it's nice to hear you kind of mention that. Following on from that question regarding your backgrounds, when you joined the company, what did you find most interesting, different, or challenging when doing your job? For example, Steve, in your case, right? What was the most important things in terms of enabling the revenue org to sell or communicate the benefits of the product, or getting people trained and up to speed, right, on something that you say conceptually can be potentially understandable, but still is very complex, right?
So I think and some of this stuff's pretty much table stakes for enablement, but figuring out the need to know from the nice to know, and then being able to put that, put all of that into plain English for people, right? And I've worked in more technical roles. I've worked in tech support when I first got on the phones in all those years ago to fix people's broadband. And you find that there's that there are a lot of technical terms in any part of any technical industry you work in, and there are often multiple terms for the same thing, and everyone uses them interchangeably, and it can be a really confusing thing to break into. So there's about helping break that barrier down, but then also making sure that our guys can find the right way to position that like information about what we do to the various types of personas, so the different levels of people, executives, directors, managers, and users, right? And it's not a simple thing to do, because you don't want them to sound too technical, you don't want them to sound too simple, right? And I'm always saying I'm looking for always seeking the Goldilocks statement or statements, right? Like that just right for the right person. So I imagine in many industries people would in enablement would echo that same thing when it comes to more technical information. But when it comes to like things that are important for enabling people, so there's two things for me. One is confidence and commercial alignment. So I need to make sure that people, when they're coming in to sell this stuff, that they do so in a confident manner, and they do so in a way that aligns to our commercial success as a business, which typically is taken care of with their targets, right? So we need to make sure we're aligned to that. And confidence comes from many. It's sort of like a catch-all phrase, really, because it comes from many different things. Knowing what you're doing, having practiced it, seeing other people do it really well, having answered questions answered. So yeah, those are my goals when I'm trying to ramp people up. Is like, are you able to have a confident and commercially aligned conversation about our proposition?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that what you mentioned there, you kind of touched upon it a little bit, that the need to know from the nice to know. And then there's always that additional element, right? That we're not necessarily selling something that's already been around for ages that everyone's aware of, right? It's something, on the one hand, you can say we've kind of the industry's had discussions about things like this or evolutions of this in the past, but this is new, right? So it brings a different level of complexity in terms of education and in terms of like, where you need to start from to kind of get the message across.
Well, I would just say, just to add very quickly on top of that's one of the core challenges as well, is like misdiagnosis from a prospecting perspective. So when we do speak to people and we do explain, we work network assurance or automation or whatever phrases that our guys will use, they often will misdiagnose what we're trying to talk about for something else that they already have or maybe they're not interested in. And that's probably the biggest thing that we face is just educating on this section of the industry, because I mean, as you guys know, if we get people to the point where they're actually looking at this thing and trying it out, like they salivate, right? Like it's a really exciting thing. It's just like, okay, but how do we get to that point where we've earned the right to do that, and get in that situation? So, but sorry, I didn't mean to sort of double answer.
No, that's great. But then kind of, all right, so now that we've got your support, which is phenomenal, and you're helping get the team up to speed, and the whole enablement aspect and education, onboarding, etc. Looking now at you Kevin, when building out the global BDR team, kind of what differences did you find during hiring or selection that's specific to the industry, and what sort of type of skills or additional skills potentially did you have to look for to find people that can sort of communicate this kind of the way it deserves to be and needs to be communicated?
Yeah, that's interesting, and kind of feeding off what Steve was saying. I mean, from a marketing theory standpoint, IP Fabric is definitely in the innovation and early adopter stage. And that means we're seeing amazing companies who understand the value of what we offer. And we are seeing the best of network engineering practices and policies. And we have to educate them. As I stated earlier, being this emerging technology and focusing on innovators and early adopters means the BDRs who reach out to these people have to excel at communication. They must be able to clearly articulate the value proposition to people who may not have heard of network assurance. And we are talking to the true opinion leaders in these in these stages. Unlike, for example, positioning, network security, data lake, or digital asset management platforms, where you've already moved past the early adoption, and now you're working on that bigger part of the market, those early majority, late majority. And in fact, when in security, many security products, sales is focused on the laggards, at that final end of that marketing cycle. So at IP Fabric, the goal of our BDR team right now is to articulate, one, the relative advantage of IP Fabric. Again, the perceived efficiencies that are gained from our platform versus, the current tools and procedures that you have in place. We want to highlight compatibility with pre-existing systems. We want to highlight the lack of complexity, the ease of learning our platform. We have to promote trialability and testability, through our demo and POC platforms. And lastly, and most important, we have to educate people on the potential for reinvention, basically using the tool for initially unintended purposes. If we get this far during our initial conversations with prospects, then we see people, they're jumping, they're eager to move into that demo of our platform. And so, again, it comes down to really, understanding that the team that we have in place right now, what Steve's helping us do is really understand who our customers are. We give them all the feedback that we gather at the top of the funnel, and it's just this ongoing cycle of we gather information, we give it to Steve, he refines it, and we're just continually refining our processes to make the team more agile and more effective. We don't want to reach out to people that, we don't want to waste their time. And, but the ones we are reaching out to that are hearing this message, they're definitely smiling and moving forward with us.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear, what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's a large element, of education in this because it's new, because you're trying to get people to the point where they kind of understand, okay, this is interesting. I'm understanding how this, for example, can augment or even improve or even replace certain processes or procedures I have that may be manual, that may be time consuming, whatever. And once you've managed to get to that point where there's a level of interest, once they see it, I guess what you guys are both saying, and it's great to hear, is, the response to the product itself is really positive, right? And that's a really, let's be honest, that's nice to have in all of our careers. Everyone wants to be out there promoting or working on a product that's actually really delivering value and improvement, and you can kind of say, this is really big, this is a change, Coming back a little bit to kind of, the whole aspect of it being fairly new, a fairly complex topic as well, a lot of nuances in it. Now that you've both been exposed to the intricacies of networking, network assurance, have you ever kind of found yourselves during your daily lives, walking about the world, doing, traveling, whatever, and kind of looked at something and then suddenly realized, the network automation, network assurance, or potentially even a customer of ours, right, is enabling something that we kind of take for granted every day to operate, function, or, deliver a service? Have you, for example, Steve, had any of those kind of moments? Or
yeah, absolutely. One of the ones that was first pointed out to me was actually by Pavel, our CEO. He was like, think about this conversation we're having, and it's real time, and there's so many complex things that need to happen, but everyone just expects that it works, right? And if there's a subtle delay, it's unacceptable, right? And you're right. I've seen multiple examples of that, and I think the way I've sort of boiled it down is that it's almost like it's like a thankless thing that people have taken for granted. Like when it works, questions are asked about the relevance of the people that run it, like are they needed? And when it doesn't work, the same questions are asked, right? Like, well, if it's working, then why do we need them? If it's not working, what are they doing? And it must, like, it must be. What I've discovered is that it's a really frustrating space to be in, to manage and operate networks, and have to, this is the non-glamorous stuff, right? It's the stuff that doesn't feature on keynotes or doesn't get much exposure internally. It's just the stuff that is expected to work. And actually in there, like, so from my perspective, working in it, the enablement for the business and the growth is, I actually think therein lies a huge opportunity for IP Fabric, in terms of helping these network teams to leverage network insights on risk, security, stability, and optimization, in particular by reporting that information upwards within the business. So that's something that I know so far we've just talked about maybe early stage and sales stuff, but once we've got a customer, I think we can add real value to that customer's operations, and that whole, this is why they're here, right? Answering that question of what, is this worth the spend? All of a sudden, yeah, like, what I think we should be doing is pointing out to them, like, yes, your CTO will really care about this information. You should share it with them. And so, yeah, that's something that we're looking to build out. But yeah, so absolutely, it feels like this. Yeah, this is like the unsung heroes of and not just companies, but of entire infrastructures. Cities, that services like my Uber, for example. Everything requires a sound network to work on, and there's what we don't think is that there's people behind that making sure it's configured correctly, etc. So yeah, definitely not moments for me.
Yeah, and it's certainly not going away, right? It's only going to get more and more important, right? Especially in the way that we're with digital transformation and kind of similar kind of global trends, shall we say. Kevin, have you had any similar moments? Anything that you can share that kind of is similar to what Steve's been saying?
Yeah, I really like this question. And to be honest, I'm one of those people who take the network for granted. Until I started developing my own home network. And let's face it, I'm a sales and marketing guy. Building a simple home network platform to handle my music and movies was kind of a daunting task. But the tools I deployed, I mean, basically they automated the deployment, they monitor, they access everything for me. And it basically proved that even someone like me could do this. And now I know comparing my home server network to what IP Fabric can do for a large enterprise company, it's a big stretch, but it was definitely an aha moment for me. And there are a better way of doing things. And when I first tried to put this together years ago, it was like, I may be overwhelmed by this. But as I started gathering the right tools and learning how to use those, making them more effective, I have a network now that is pretty good. If I could just keep my neighbors off of it, which has been a big task, I've got some pretty good speed there.
Well,
so yeah, that was definitely my aha moment.
Congrats on building that out. That sounds like it must have been a pretty interesting challenge for you. But on the other hand, these aha moments or eureka moments, they're really great, right? It kind of you see something that not only people take for granted, but it's even that realization that a lot of people don't have, right? Because if you don't come in contact with it in some way, then you don't really think about it, right? It doesn't come into your sphere of focus, shall we say?
I have a whole new appreciation for the network managers and network directors, understanding what they do, the amount of work that goes in and day out, and how many manual tasks they have versus, now as we move towards this world of automation and network assurance, it is truly amazing to see what we can do and how we can help them.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I share that with you as well in terms of appreciation. Okay, so if we kind of come back a little bit to the roles that you have in the company, what's the single most important bit of advice that you'd give to someone wanting to work in industry in whatever role? I mean, Steve, if you wouldn't mind taking us first there.
So I actually share this when I do interviews with people, right? Because I think this is really important, and it is that the only constant is change. So to approach everything with a reasoned positivity. So there's that's actually a designed thing that I've sort of developed to say, right? But so let me just break it down. There's a few elements to it. The first is that you need to be someone that can handle and work with change. If change scares you, if it rocks your boat in any way, you're going to be a nervous wreck, right? In this type of industry, because things move so often and so quickly, and in some instances so drastically, that you just have to be someone that can roll with a punch and can stay on top of things, right? And it can be exhausting, right? Because you think, oh, I've just got my head around this, and now they've just released a new version or whatever, right? So absolutely being adaptable. And then the second one is being positive and someone that people like to work with, right? That's an element of it. So that just makes everything easier, I suppose. And then finally, the piece about like reasoning is that you shouldn't be someone that just says yes to everything. Like, that's important. But then any alternatives that you may offer in a situation should be stuff that are based on facts and data rather than an opinion or a feeling. You know, I've worked with many graduate schemes, and you know, people that are early in career. There's even one or two at the IP Fabric that are sort of, you know, put under my wing and they're sort of helping out. And I'd say that one is the most common one that I have to do coaching on, and sort of say, look, let me just point out this was something that was more emotional that you felt, or was an opinion rather than anything based on data and fact. So it's about, you know, and it's not to say that the suggestion is wrong. It's about how do we present that information. So I just feel like there's going to be change, but you have to have this reasoned positivity when handling it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it must be very rewarding as well, right? Kind of mentoring, supporting, educating, right? It's a rewarding career. It's a rewarding challenge.
Yeah, I love it.
Challenge.
Yeah.
Awesome. Kevin, how about yourself in terms of business development?
I think from everything Steve said, it comes down to this. It comes down to culture. Corporate culture drives success, and only a company with a strong, agile culture that values its people enough to learn from their interactions in the marketplace, those are the ones that are going to survive long enough to start attracting, you know, those early and late majority adopters. You know, that's 68% of the marketplace. And if we are listening to the information that's being gathered from the people, and the company culture is one that allows that and that values that feedback, we will see success. And this is why I enjoy the BDR leadership role so much. And again, working with Steve too, there's more customer interaction at the BDR level of sales than any other function. I mean, we talk to more people in a day than a lot of people talk to in weeks, sometimes months. You know, we gather this information, and you know, I'm able to feed it back to Steve. I'm able to feed it back to the members on your team, and we just again keep creating this perpetual motion machine that is driving us forward. You know, more effective outreach campaigns that are going to attract potential customers. And I love knowing, you know, that all the activity at the top of the revenue funnel has a positive impact on what we're doing. And we're seeing that in our sales and with our prospects.
And it's interesting, the answers are kind of, they lead to each other, right? Because kind of being willing to accept and work with change is also supported by the culture the company has, right? You can't really have, they work together, and one on their own would be just half of it, but together it's kind of stronger than the sum of the individual parts, right? So
that's human networking. I mean, that's the sum of it. We're just feeding off one another. Steve's laughing, but I tell you, I have more chemistry with this guy. We just feed off one another back and forth with the information, continuing to develop everything we do.
Yeah, that, you know, who wouldn't want that, right? That sounds pretty much ideal. I think that's kind of what we all dream of when we say we all spend a lot of time at work, right? A majority of our, to a certain extent, time that we're kind of awake, shall we say, right? So to have a good culture, to have a good chemistry, I fully get how, you know, how critical that is, and it's kind of great that that's the foundation that we kind of have. Guys, thanks for your answers. I've got one last little question just to lead us out here. And it's what's the most important or interesting thing you've learned since you kind of joined IP Fabric in terms of network assurance or the industry? And Kevin, if you wouldn't mind starting again from your side, please.
Keep an open mind. There's always better, easier ways to do things. And just because this is how we've always done it in the past, doesn't mean that's how we have to do it in the future.
Awesome. There's that openness to change again.
Yep. Very simple.
Steve, how about you?
I think one of the more interesting thing that I learned, if I look at it from a selling perspective, right, and like going to market, it was actually from our product evangelist, Darren Fulwell. So he told me this. So I've just name dropped him because, you know, I know he's like a big personality. That was a weird thing, finding out that he was a big personality in the industry, actually, but because he was just Darren, right? But yeah, and that's that. There's a lot of people on network teams who are stretched with time and like sincerely don't have enough time in the day to do what would be perceived as a bare minimum. And that's like tasks, that's meetings, that's reactionary stuff, firefighting, that's learning everything. And that for me was quite eye-opening, because I don't think I've ever worked in an area where people are so pulled in so many different directions. That's probably what I'm trying to say, and trying to spread themselves so thinly. And it helped me, like I said, from a go-to-market perspective, because you're like, oh, okay, this is, there's actually a really good thing that we can do here, not just from a time-saving perspective, but even like accuracy. Like I know from personal experience, if I'm pressed for time and I'm trying to do something and I rush it, I'll inevitably make a mistake, and it will be subtle. I won't make any major mistakes. But then when I publish that thing, or when I share that information and someone then points out that mistake, I hate it, right? Because I want it to be right. Like I need my information to be correct. I don't like it to be incorrect. And I imagine that's exactly, the type of frustration that our network, the network teams go through. Like they experience this stuff. And so there's multiple, it was great for me understanding a lot about, like, I suppose, a day in the life, and like what the reality of these people that will benefit the most from our solution is, right? So, and then it I'd already joined the company, but it made me, so I'd already like decided I was going to be here, and it was a good product, but it made me sort of realize even more, like, God, yeah, this thing, like, yes, it was developed by people that used to do that job, which is interesting in itself, but it's also supported by a number of other people that used to do that job who came here because of that. They came here because they were like, I would have loved that, in my life. So that really reinforced my belief. And going back to that whole confidence piece, when people are ramping up, I've got insane confidence in our product because of it, because of what these got. Not because I know about it, like, or I use it, but because I listen to these experts and they tell me how great it is, right? So that was huge for me, was like listening to Darren and getting him to tell me about, just like, I don't know, a day in the life, a week in the life, however you want to call it, and then how that actually translated into how we could position ourselves when it comes to selling this product.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really interesting and great answer. I mean, the amount of responsibility on, networking professionals' shoulders, these mission critical systems on a day-to-day basis that depend on them, and being able to support that. I fully kind of get where you're coming from. And again, you even alluded to a certain extent to the culture, right? The people here that are saying, I wish I'd have had this. So that's why I want to help, get this out there and kind of, just kind of work together on building this out more. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, sharing these answer stories. Steve, Kevin, thank you very much. Everyone, thank you very much for tuning in to this podcast. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you on our future podcasts. Take care, everyone.